Hello, Miami University community. We're here for our first of two Black History Month webinars today, and we're featuring two of our Black alumni from the 2000s, the class of 2004 and 2005. So today we have Erika Baty from the class of 2004. She's the author of Chocolates that I got here. And then we have Nicole Miller from the class of 2005, and I have one of her books she previously wrote uh, here as well, and she's coming out with a new book this spring. So we're excited about that. So we want to talk about their journeys for becoming an author and kind of relate their experiences as students and how they use those experiences to write their book, and also about the importance of Black authors. And so we'll go ahead and start here. We'll start with Erika. Can you tell us what was your journey to become an author?
Yeah, well, I grew up writing and doing a lot of poetry and doing a lot of like writing contests. And then I went to college and majored in journalism, started with creative writing. Kind of always knew I was going to do some type of writing. I worked for the Gannett. I used to work for the Des Moines Register, doing some freelance writing. Wanted to get more into the creative writing. And so the thought of like how I was going to go about that was I going to start with novels. Children's books were not part of what I thought I was going to be doing. So it's just an interesting journey. And so I kind of a couple of years back was thinking about society and the thought of chocolates came to me. So that's kind of the journey.
Nicole?
So it's interesting because I didn't have a background in writing at Miami, but I always grew up reading and didn't know that being an avid reader made you a really good writer. And I knew that I was good at English and math. So I ended up going into business, and my background's in business. But it was during some downtime at work where I started getting into blogs. And I was reading a lot of blogs, and it reminded me of how much I love stories. And I started a blog called betterthanwine.net. And I started blogging, and I wrote a blog post that really hit a lot of people emotionally. It's called How to Overcome Heartbreak. And that blog inspired my first book. So it just started very organically and kind of like off the cuff. And it started into nonfiction, where I published my first two nonfiction books, and then moved into fiction during the pandemic. So it's been a journey that's been slowly unfolding out of my business background.
Since you both were on campus at the same time at Miami, can you kind of let us know about how your experiences at Miami may have influenced your writing or your journey to become an author, specifically, or anything that you used in your books that you've written? So we'll start with Nicole.
So I have such fond memories of Miami. So many of my best friends are from there. It was such a pivotal time of my journey of learning my identity, catapulting me into purpose, and giving me a lot of challenges academically.
Right.
So I do attribute some of my writing to Miami, even though I didn't major in writing. That business background has caused me and motivated me to form a business out of my writing, with starting my publishing company and even the bookkeeping business I had before. So with my new novel, When Love Wins, I actually talk about a little bit of my experience in Miami and how that experience was life-changing for me spiritually, and was influenced by an administrator at the time, Mr. Madison. So I definitely give a shout out to Mr. Madison. He gave me a very important word during my sophomore year, where I was lonely and depressed and didn't know it, but he saw it. And he asked me, "What do you love to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I love music." And so he suggested I join Miami University Gospel Singers. And that was a life-changing experience for me. That's where I met a lot of my friends. That's where I catapulted into my faith and really developed community. It was the first time in my whole journey where I can say I developed covenant relationships and experienced a tight-knit community, was at Miami. So I attribute that experience of Miami so much to the target market for When Love Wins, our college age students. Even in Stories for the Urban Soul, I have a few college age stories there, and I pull from my experiences at Miami. So very pivotal time that's still influencing my writing today.
Erika?
Yeah, and being at Miami, going from Iowa to Miami of Ohio, and then having a more diverse group of friends and sorority sisters. I pledged there. I'm a Delta. I went there. I had a lot of friends of different ethnicities. I've always had that, and I always intentionally looked for that, even at Miami, and being able to kind of share my story with different people, even within like, an all Black sorority. We have so many diverse people from different backgrounds. And just between that, I did psych. I was a psych major at Miami as well at one point. And just thinking about life and people and just like my love of people and culture. I think being at Miami just helped me to continue to be creative. And so for that, even with my book called Chocolates, it's just kind of the concept of like, like we're talking about love and honor, basically, like loving each other, honoring each other, respecting each other. And so, Miami helped me to continue to see and to drive to be like thinking and wanting to contribute. And as far as like also with my book, I donate and I partner with No Kid Hungry and Feeding America. So being of a sorority and part of a sorority and just community service and sisterhood, I've kind of also applied that to my book. And so I wanted to give back more in that way.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So you tell us, so we'd like to know more about the books. And so you talked about the journey, you talked about Miami. So tell us more about the books that you have written, the materials you've written. So here, we'll start with Erika. Tell us about Chocolates. What is it all about?
Sure. Good old Chocolates. It was a concept that I came up with. I was thinking about people, and this was during a time when we had a lot of racial stuff going on in the news, and which has always been around, right? That's nothing new. But I was really getting frustrated and kind of hurt, and it was making me think about relationships and my friendships, and what friends of mine that were white were like, that were thinking a certain way or believing a certain way, and I just didn't want to know about it. And I was thinking we were all kind of on the same page of loving one another and hoping that was the case, and just kind of thinking about skin tones. And I started thinking, I was actually originally with the book thinking about brown skinned people, and I was thinking we all come in different shades of chocolate. And I started thinking, oh, wow, like white chocolate, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, semi-sweet, like, there's a whole spectrum. And I got to the girl in the back of my book who has vitiligo. And I was thinking from white to black for proof that opposites attract. And I realized, oh my God, this is an all-inclusive book. And so the book kind of changed from that. And I started thinking like, oh my God, I want to write the back of the book to look like a nutritional label. And so that was really fun to do. And it says, like, in a world full of assorted chocolates, let's enjoy all of our decadent flavors. To ensure quality and freshness, please keep cool while encouraging, nurturing, uplifting, loving, and protecting every one of us. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And then I really wanted to, because it's called chocolates, I wanted it to be decadent and rich and simple, but still very like rich in thought and in concept. So you peel it back and it's die stamped to look like a chocolate bar. And then we have a dozen different characters in the book. And it just kind of starts with like, you are a chocolate love story. Oh, I'm always quick on that. With you, the plot sweetens, and it just keeps going. And there's multiple different ethnicities in the book, different little affirmations. And so that was just kind of the concept and the idea of the book. And this is the first book. I completed a book for each one of the 12 characters. So it's going to be a board book box set. And the binding will go from dark chocolate to white chocolate. And each kid has its own board book.
Oh, wow. I'm loving the creativity here.
Yeah. And I started thinking more like, okay, I'm doing stuff with love. What more can I do? Because I wasn't really good with wanting to just talk about myself. So I was like, let me figure out some other things that I can do. And I was thinking, oh, chocolate actually is a luxury. Food's a necessity, but chocolate's a luxury. We just eat it. We're very privileged enough to never even think about it as we're just popping it in our mouth. So I decided to think, oh my God, wait, I can partner with No Kid Hungry, Feeding America, and there's 12 affirmations in the book. So I donate 12 meals per book.
Wonderful. So Nicole, do you want to talk about your short stories here, Urban Souls, and then you want to talk about give a little sneak peek of the When Love Wins.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to applaud Erika because that was just cool. I was amazed at the aesthetics, at the layout, at the attention to detail with the back and everything. So love it, and the spinoffs.
Yeah.
So when I started my writing career, I did nonfiction initially. So my first two books are How to Overcome Heartbreak series. The very first book I share a story of heartbreak, interestingly enough, happened during my college years. And then the second book, I share more for me, but I interview 7 women and 4 men. And it's written so that other people can find their story in the stories of these people. Then I kind of pivot. I took some writing workshops with Lit Cleveland and started a short story. Had never written a short story before. And the very first short story I wrote was Lisa's story, a character Lisa, who's a journalist in New York. She's at a Black-owned cafe called Devon's, and she's divorced and she finds a love interest. She's a single parent. And so I started peeling back the layers of short story writing and infusing spirituality into Black culture. And I found out how rewarding it was. Like I get to talk about 2 of the things I'm most passionate about. Why did I never think of this before? So when I did that, I started writing more short stories, but I took a break from writing and blogging. I was dealing with the loss of my mother and I couldn't write. But what I was doing was I started reading fiction a lot. And in reading fiction a lot, it stirred up my creative gift. And right around the pandemic, when there was like a lot of more downtime in my schedule and more flexibility, I just kind of thought offhandedly like, oh, I should, write some more short stories and, finish this or whatever. And then there were all these opportunities happening in the Black community after George Floyd happened that opened up spaces for Black voices, Black stories. And there was a particular publishing house that was opening up their opportunity for you to submit your manuscript without an agent. Normally, you need to have an agent when you're submitting it to a traditionally published company. So I was like, and they had a deadline. So I was like, well, let me hurry up and finish this book so I can submit it. I ended up finishing the book, submitting it, but it didn't even qualify for that genre. But I knew that that was a sign for me to publish this book. Otherwise, I would have just been sitting on those stories. Like I had them for years. And so I'm like, all right, I felt led spiritually. I need to just publish it myself like I did with the other ones, having no idea that it was going to be a catalyst for a whole novel. And like Erika said, she has these other spinoffs of her characters. That's what's happening with my novel. So I did Stories for the Urban Soul and published it in May of 2021. But I also had started a novel called When Love Wins, which again, we're at Devon's Cafe in New York. And so you get to see some of these characters that were a preview in my short stories for Urban Stories. And I ended up finishing and publishing Urban Stories while working on the novel. And so in the midst of me pushing Urban Stories, I finally have finalized When Love Wins, which is a story of 2 young women with a rift in their relationship. They're cousins. One woman, her name is Natalie. She's like the faith-based social advocate writer. She loses her mother and she moves in with her cousin Ashley, who is like the urban socialite fashionista. So they're very opposite, polar opposite. And she thinks she's moving in to get support from her cousin and from her uncle, but she faces a cold welcome. And so there's a rift between them because Ashley has a perceived betrayal that stems from childhood. So the book is dealing with childhood trauma, bullying, parents, absenteeism, mental health issues, but it really infuses contemporary African-American culture with media they listen to, urban swag, clothes, dress, all the things. So it's kind of a nod to the 90s with the Black Renaissance that happened back then, but fun and encouraging and including spirituality and dealing with these topics. So it's been a journey. I've been working on it for 2.5 years, have done a lot of market research, going to New York, staying in Jersey, doing interviews, having beta readers, a lot of editing. And so we're finally here where the book launch will be April 1st, the weekend of my 40th. And there will be a virtual launch on April 1st and then the physical launch on the 2nd. So actually the virtual launch is March 31st and then the physical launch is on the 1st. So that's kind of like all the things that was birthed out from the short stories that I wrote at a workshop in Cleveland. Now I have like a whole novel.
So you finished writing the short stories while you're writing the novel?
I literally was working on both at the same time at one point. It was
Wow.
like I was finalizing and doing editing for Stories for the Urban Soul. And then this novel was coming to me. And I'd never written a novel in my life. So I just knew I was a good storyteller. So even when I thought I was done with the novel, I was like, oh, I'm done. I submitted to my editor, and she's like, girl, you're not done. She's like, but you do have the makings of a good novel. And that led to a whole nother year of editing. So, but yeah, at one point I was finalizing Urban Stories and working on When Love Wins. So it's just been about a 2.5 year process of both of these projects.
Wow, that's impressive. Finishing one project while working on another one. That's I'll hand clap for that.
I often wonder if that's how it is for authors sometimes, because you're in the middle of one story that can transition. I literally wrote all 13 of those books at the same time. I was writing the one and then I was like, oh my God. And so I would look at it, and I had like this big platform and I'm writing all of them at the same time. And then when I finished, I was like, oh, this is cool. I've got this one book that I'm going to publish. I can't do 13 at once.
Wow. And I was going to say that I do feel like it's that creative gift where it's just kind of stirring in you and so much inspires you. And you're tapping into like, go ahead.
And for example, like my books are really simple, but like this one was You Are a Dark Chocolate Valentine, Loving You as a Holiday. So his book spins off and it says, I'd love to celebrate your independence. And then it's fireworks and it says, my beautiful queen or king, you're a chocolate lover's dream. And that one's actually interesting because I'm throwing in Halloween, like my beautiful, but then it says queen, by a chocolate lover, or you're my beautiful queen or king, you're a chocolate lover's dream. So I kind of threw in there Dr. King, I have a dream right there. And then it ends like I could just gobble you up. So each one has something to do with whatever is in the first affirmation in the book, that's what their book goes to. So that's why it was easy to start doing them at the same time.
Well, one of my questions is, because I've worked with a couple of children's authors with my publishing house, how did you connect with your illustrators? Because your illustrations look phenomenal. And I know that's half the battle for children's authors.
Ooh, phenomenal, right?
So because I self-published, I purposely self-published because a lot of times when we go the agent route or go, the professional publishing route, that way they don't want you to have an illustrator. My husband's an illustrator. So
nice.
He did all the art. He's actually top 10 internationally for caricature art. He's an extremely talented, wide scoped artist, and so I couldn't not have him do my illustrations for my book. It was hard and challenging because you're married to that person and they're an artist, so you're like, where's the due dates? Where's the art? Due dates.
You got deadlines here.
Deadlines. They're like, well, you're my wife. So, but no, it was. I had a certain vision of the illustrations in my mind, and so that I wanted the kids like staring at you, looking at you, so like you were kind of feeling like you were being introduced to each person like culturally, and so we had to go back and forth on that a lot of times, but illustration, yes, but this is why I self-published, because I wasn't going to not have the illustrator I wanted. And I do have some really cool opportunities possibly for Netflix or a couple of other cartoon options.
Awesome.
They lead me to needing an agent. So I'm kind of in the middle of trying to figure that out right now. And I thought it would be really cute to have books called, or the characters have names like Herschel, or a baby named Ruth, which is a little kind of, I don't know, may work, may not work, but just little like somebody named Coco, and just like really cute. But yeah, so self-publishing, is a journey that you and I both have gone on. But you can, there's the pros and cons of that.
And I didn't know that with traditionally published companies, you can't choose your own illustrator. That's such good information to have.
Yeah, they want to pick. I mean, it's very what they would have to do in that situation is then become the agent for both of us.
Wow.
Somehow. So yeah, it just depends. But a lot of times they don't want you to come with that. They just want you to come with the written word, or an illustrator going to them and showing them a portfolio of their illustrations, but not you bringing them to the table. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yes. So what I'm finding interesting is both of you started your own publishing company. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I lived in China for a long time, and so I have some good connections there. And my book, being specially like, it's got foil, it's die stamped. It's got, spot UV, like in the US, that's really hard to do. And I used to talk to a lot of different agents and different publishing houses. And what I found out is they all were in China, like the major ones print in China as well. And so I thought, oh, well, this is crazy. Like I could be, because that book would have cost me $20-$30 to print in the US. And so I also felt like, well, my book is about universal, like international. So why not like pull from those resources?
Nicole, why did you decide to do your own publishing company from your perspective?
Yeah, so initially I chose self-publishing because a friend of mine said, hey, you can just go through, at the time was CreateSpace. They do all the things, bada bing, bada boom. I didn't see myself as a real writer. So that's a whole nother thing. It's like I had to do a mindset shift within the last 2 years. So I just thought like, oh, I'm a businesswoman with this book to publish, right? So I wasn't really trying to be serious and get a lit agent and do a query and submit it and all the stuff. But with Urban Stories, when I was trying to be more serious, I kind of shared how I did look into it. It didn't open that door for me at that time. So I went ahead and just published it myself. I looked into getting like hybrid publishers, which is what I am with Andy Miller Publishing, where you partner with the client and, you work out, they usually get all the royalties and the copyright and all that stuff, or you can create a plan. But I looked into that. And when I looked at the charge, like what they were charging, what they were offering, I knew like, well, I can just do this myself. So I ended up doing it myself. But even with When Love Wins, I thought about it. I just think from the research that I've done, there is a lot of red tape. Erika kind of touched on it when she talked about like, well, you can't use your own illustrator. You really have to read the fine print. I've talked to other people that have gotten deals and have self-published with hybrid publishers. Sometimes, they could put your book on the shelf and take it off when they want to. Sometimes you don't have rights. Sometimes the advance that you get is eaten up by costs. I mean, there's like a lot of things that you need to know. And back in the day, it was kind of taboo to self-publish, right? Because the quality wasn't there, the professionalism wasn't there. Well, now that's different. Like social media has really given us more empowerment where we actually can build our own audience. We actually can connect with people who are going to support us. We do our marketing, even through social media. Whereas back in the day, a lot of the big publishing companies did that for you and they had the distribution. Well, now we can connect directly with distributors and we can get our books in there ourselves. And even publishing companies, when I looked into it this time around and looking at lit agents, they still want to know your numbers. Well, how big is your audience? How many followers you have? Who's on your email list? All the things. And they still want you to kind of grind and do it yourself, even though you're doing all of this work and they're not doing it as much for you. So for me, it's like, well, I'd rather keep most of the profit, which I kind of touched on this before, this meeting with you, Seth. Ordering directly from my site allows me to have more of the profit. And if I'm going to be doing the marketing myself, then I might as well get paid for it, So you kind of got to weigh the pros and cons. I'm not knocking traditional publishing, but for me, because I have the time flexibility and the hustle behind it to go with it, because it is a lot of hustle. Right. I'm just like, well, I'll just do it myself. So,
yeah.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's great. Eric, do you want to add anything more to that, or that?
No, I think like the part that she was saying that I was thinking about is like, even when you like have, representation, you're still doing a lot of the work. And so it's not, you're still, you're still having to do a lot of the work and still a lot of the grind and hustle. And you're just not receiving as much as you could if you were doing it yourself. So that part is hard as far as like for me now with a 1-year-old. I can't hustle as much as I do a lot of book events and like I make a lot of profit from that, but it's really hard to go to book events and do book signings with it. So I'm having to pivot a little bit and do a little bit more when thinking about that I need to do more, which is also why the publishing came in. Like I do website designs, I know how to do the publishing. So why not start a business on that too? And so that's just kind of, that's just kind of the gist of it, I think.
And I think you touched on it, like it's about the season you're in, right? So you're a mom, so that's definitely your number one priority. And for me, I'm always sensitive to when is my season going to change. With each book, there may be a different season for me to look into a lit agent. That's why I revisited it with When Love Wins. That just hasn't happened for me yet. I even tell people when they're an entrepreneur and social media marketing, like, I do it myself because I have time, flexibility, and I enjoy it. Don't do it if you don't have time, if you don't enjoy it, if this is stressing you out. Like, get a college intern, get someone wet behind the ears that needs experience. Like, don't do anything that is not giving you joy. So.
Right. And there are ways to do both a little bit of that. Like, you can get agents, you can get representation, and do certain books that way and certain ones not that way. It just depends on kind of what you're going for. Like, for me, if I want to look into media and entertainment, I obviously don't have a background or knowledge on how to get into that, and so therefore an agent is necessary. But at the same time, as an author, it is really hard to give up your profits for somebody else. We've worked really hard on that, so I applaud you, Nicole.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. Let us all know, give all the tea on on why you should do your own publishing company if you can do it, so you can keep your own money. Okay.
Right.
So you both mentioned I heard George Floyd. That's the racial conscience of what's going on in America was a national conversation again a couple years back. And so kind of alluding to that, and just now, being Black History Month, celebrating our history and Black excellence in all things. Can you tell us about the importance of Black authors, according to your perspective? Why should Black authors should be celebrated, and many of your favorite authors that you may have? And so we'll start with Nicole and then go with Erika.
Yeah, I really believe we need Black authors to vocalize our experience as Black Americans, especially when it comes to systemic oppression and reoccurring injustices. Our community has faced a unique type of oppression in that we can't blend in with the dominant culture like other minorities can. So our hair, our facial features, our shape, our skin tone, all of that stands out like no other people group. And our history of oppression is unique in that we've been treated as inhumane, being branded and viewed as property. So our history, even before slavery, was stripped. Our rights were snatched, and all we had were our stories. When laws made it illegal for our ancestors to read and write, they were still able to sing and tell stories. So I personally feel like it's my duty to use my gift that they fought to have. It's a privilege to me to be able to read and write when they weren't allowed to. And I think because so much of our history was lost prior to slavery, our ability to tell stories of Black American culture helps keep our history alive to the newer generations. And it gives us a platform of influence to bring awareness to other systems of oppression. One of my stories in Urban Stories is about a young Black male who's a college student, and his friend is killed while jogging in the park back home on break. And the story is Tyrone's story, and it was inspired by Ahmaud Arbery. And it was just a way for me to release my own pain and trauma from that experience. And then I have a poem dedicated to George Floyd called For George in that book. And so creative writing has been such a great outlet as a Black person to release the trauma, to release the pain, to try to put words to it, and to start that journey of healing from it as a community. So I think being a Black author is so necessary for us to vocalize what's happening in our community and to pass on our history as Black Americans to the next generation and to heal through creative writing spaces. And you asked about like our favorite authors. I was heavily influenced by, like I said, the 90s Renaissance. So definitely the Omar Tyrese, the Sister Soldiers, the Terry McMillans. Like, I know that my writing style is a tribute to them in trying to bring forth that type of Black swag culture, and esteem. So.
Okay. Yeah. Erika, from your perspective, what is the importance of Black authors, and who's your favorites?
I think the awesome thing about Black culture is that it is extremely diverse. There are people of so many different talents and from so many different backgrounds, and our art and our entertainment and our soul kind of come from that. We have so much from music within music, within writing, within the just different voices. You're talking about Terry McMillan, then you have Langston Hughes, and you have Maya Angelou. Like there's so many, and we're beautiful in our art. And so for me, that's what I tend to think about when I think about writing, when I think about the history of, like Nicole was talking about, how at one point we couldn't, we didn't know how to read and write. And so to come to a place where we're writing novels and being able to be influential and being heard and seen and felt. I've always just loved writing. I love poetry. Poetry is where my heart is, actually. That's where I started. And so I feel like poetry is just, it's words, a song through words written down as opposed to sing. And I can't sing to save my life, so I can write. But and just us as a people, like we feel so much, and there's so much there, and there's so much pain, and there's so much love, and there's so much misunderstood. And so I think through writing, through different diverse people of African American, like just the way that we write, just the beauty in it, just the depth that it goes into, even with the simplicity of it. That's just something that I've always cherished and loved. And I'm so grateful to have that talent. I don't have the talent of singing, which I wish I had, but I still feel that way, and I still feel through that when I'm writing. And I intentionally, in the book, because I started off with wanting to do this as a book for brown skinned people, and then realizing I wanted it to be all inclusive, I still intentionally made sure that there were 6 brown skinned people in this book. So half of the characters in the book are, and they look very different. And I wanted that to be the point as well. The first person has albinism. So I wanted to kind of talk and go through that. And it's really slight things, but this person has albinism. We also kind of did this person gender neutral. Me and my husband think it's a very different gendered person. And then I wanted to do some talking on vitiligo. And I intentionally wanted to do like 2 head wraps in the book. I wanted to do somebody Middle Eastern, but give them blue eyes for different perspectives. Because I feel like people, sometimes think Black people all think the same, act the same, but we have very diverse thoughts and opinions. Even within my own sorority, like we're a sisterhood, but we think very differently on a lot of topics, and we have very different people. And that's kind of what makes us as Black people just amazingly awesome, because we're so talented, so different, so diverse. But at the end of the day, we still look at each other and are like, yeah, like we're out here doing it. So that's my thoughts on that. I haven't written anything yet. I am starting on short stories too, Nicole. So that would be, but because I'm doing this little, like I'm doing board books now. I have a picture book. I started thinking, oh my God, kind of like Chicken Noodle Soup for the Teenage Soul, like all of those. I want to do one that's bite-sized, like stories, like bittersweet, like sweet stories, but with different cultural conversations in short stories. So I'm working on that too, because there are so many different experiences, so many different thoughts within us as Black folk.
Wow. You actually reminded me, Erika, like Stories for the Urban Soul is a nod to Chicken Soup for the Soul. And that's kind of how I market it. It's a good hallmarky joy type of reading, because I want, even though we've been through so much as a people group, I don't want us to focus on the trauma and the pain. I want to embody that Black joy in my writing and bring hope and encouragement to my people, as well as other people who want to hear Black stories, which I've been encouraged to know that people who are different races and ethnicities do want to hear our voice and do want to hear our stories. So you reminded me of that. And I also was thinking of the importance of seeing representation in fiction and how that encourages people in real life. I think of stories I think of shows like A Different World. I've heard of people actually going to college because they saw Black people going to college on that show. And so I think it's important as Black authors too, that we show the representation and the diverse people with all types of skin tones that are brown infused in these higher up positions, leadership positions, governing positions, to know that this too can be you. You can be in a place of empowerment and influence and leadership in this culture, even though you look this way. So,
yes.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. Having wrote these fantastic books and novels coming up here, what advice would you give to aspiring authors? How should they start about their journey to writing the book? We can start with Erika, then go with Nicole.
It's normal to cry. It's normal to be frustrated. It's normal because you're doing something really intensely personal. You're, kind of giving a bit of yourself to the world. And so it's really complicated and difficult and scary. And I found that after I wrote the book, I was having a really hard time sharing it, because it kind of was like, oh, it was my baby. And then I was kind of like having to present it to the world, which was like a really vulnerable thing to do. And so I think that's one thing that I wasn't expecting. I thought, like, man, I got to finish this book. I got to finish this book. Like, I got to get done with this. I got to get this out here. I need to make some money. But then as soon as I was done, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't want it. Like, I don't know if I want to share this with anybody. It's me. It's like, it's me showing you something I've created, and for everybody to like kind of look at and critique and break apart. And that was really vulnerable. So I think that was one thing that I wasn't expecting, but now that I've gone through it, I recognize that will always be what happens when you're writing and you're sharing. I think just giving yourself the grace of understanding that it's scary and that it's difficult and that you will challenge yourself and sometimes also talk yourself out of moving on to the next chapters. But I think that's just normal growth. And also, give yourself the space to, sometimes you just don't have the time. Like, everybody is not, like Nicole is saying, she has the time and she has the flexibility. Some people just don't, and they're still trying to figure out how they can still work and do these creative things. And, maybe find a reading group and like a writers group. Reddit. I know a couple of people have gotten a lot of help off of Reddit or just different like platforms. And I think that would be the most, and just stay true to yourself. Like, it's easier to write if it's something you really believe in or have a passion about than just trying. Like, I'm never going to write like science fiction because like, I don't, that's just not my genre at all. And even though like I might be like, oh, there's money there, like I would be a horrible science fiction writer. I'm more on like love and love and war. And just feelings. And so I think that's one of those things. And for people who also, I think it just takes a lot of time when you start writing. It takes a lot of time. My book, as simple as it is, took like 2.5 years because it switched and it changed. And in my mind, things changed, and the way I wanted to develop the characters changed. And I hadn't even, like, this book has no character, like there's no depth to the characters. It's just straight up affirmations. So then to have to start thinking about who these characters are, what they sound like, who are their voices, is a whole nother space that I haven't really gotten into yet. So I just think if you want to write and you have a passion for it, just like anything else, it's hard. It doesn't come easy. You may skip a year or two and go back to it. But I feel like that's everything. You crawl before you walk, you cry, you complain, you're frustrated, you rip up pages, you pray. Like, there's, it's a growth and development thing that you're going through on your own, and it's only you. And so that kind of work and that type of art, it's not like when we go to work, when we go out and work in corporate America. It's a very different space. It's you battling thoughts and how you create and how you feel and what you're putting out there. And some of that also comes from personal. Like, what you're putting out there also is created from that. I love this book, and I often have people come to me, and I get teary-eyed all the time because I love people, and it's frustrating to have so much pain within Black America and pain. I had a random story on that. I hadn't had that much backlash on my book. I kept thinking I don't have enough people in the book. Like, so that's what people are going to say is it's not as diverse as it can be. And interesting enough, I've only had 2 complaints, and one was somebody was talking about in the book it says like dark chocolate, milk chocolate, white chocolate right here. It just kind of says dedicated to all the chocolate lovers. And I've only had 2 kind of crazy situations. One where somebody was really upset that I didn't spell milk MYLK. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't even know what that is. And they were trying to do a push for veganism. And I was like, okay, well, almond milk is still spelled MILK, like in the grocery store. So that was fine. But then the more interesting thing when you talk about we're talking about Black America and the complexity of it and just how much pain is rooted within so much stuff within our own people to our own people. I had a African American guy come to me one time and he was really upset. He wrote through the book and he was like, "Are you trying to say all people are chocolate?" And I was like, "Yes, that's the concept of the book." And he was like, "Even white people?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "Don't you know the history of America?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, here we go." Because I'm also in a public space where like I'm trying to like show love to everybody, and I'm in the middle of this conversation with somebody who's getting kind of upset with me with trying to say everybody's chocolate. And I was like, well, yes, white people as well, because white chocolate comes, it still has cocoa butter. Like it's all part of the same plant. And an interesting thing enough about that was his wife walked around the corner and she was white. And I was like, what? Like, okay, like there's so much going on here. And then her kids came around and their kids came around and they were mixed. And so it was just there's such an interesting space to be in for somebody to be upset with me as a Black male for including people that are of all races. Yet here he was married to somebody who wasn't Black and they had kids. And I was like, this is exactly like what I'm talking about is love. Like, so there's that.
Okay. So Nicole Niner had some things are resonating with her. So
Yeah.
go ahead and share.
Embodied was when you're an artist and you put your work out there, people are going to have their opinions. And that's something that I also wasn't ready for. Not that I've had a whole bunch of backlash because I don't have that type of exposure, but I have been surprised at how people have interpreted some of my stories. I've definitely received some critique on some of my writing from readers, even though they themselves, it's like, you don't have a book. Like, where are you trying to tell me? So, being prepared for that as an aspiring writer, I also resonate with the tenacity and the endurance that you need to have, because this is just not an overnight process. I know that I'm also an entrepreneur and I'm around a lot of entrepreneurs. And that's one thing, right? When you're building something from scratch, that's its own grit and gut that you're putting into your vision, your baby, your dream. But I also think when you're a creative entrepreneur, that is it's like being a double major at Miami, right? So it's like you have 2 really big goals. And when you're creative and a writer, you're investing, you're journeying, you're kind of like planting all of these seeds, and it doesn't just grow overnight. I've spent 8 to 10 hour days just writing. Like it is its own job. And I've had other businesses at the same time. I still have another business, the publishing house at the same time. But you kind of fight for it. You have to fight for it, for your dream to manifest. And that one day you will have whatever outcome you want. Maybe it's just a book for your family to read, or maybe you want to be on Netflix. I don't know. Whatever that dream is, but ultimately it is to get your book published, right? And for other eyes to see it. So keeping in mind that it is not overnight, that you are going to have to cry. Like she said, I have definitely cried when I was writing When Love Wins and I thought I was done, and I sent it to my first editor because I have 2 editors. When I sent it to her and she gave me all this red tape feedback, I cried and I asked myself, am I supposed to be doing this? And I did not touch that manuscript for 3 months. Like, I was like, I can't, but I went back to it because when you're called to it, when you're in purpose, like you are going to get it done, right? It may take you some years, it may take you time, but you're going to get it done. And so I would encourage people to work on their craft, take writing workshops. Your gift is going to keep being developed. That's the thing as a writer, like, you're going to be at one level here, and in a year, you're going to be at a whole nother level. So even last summer, I took a writing workshop in Cleveland. Shout out to Lit Cleveland. And I feel like my writing was like at an 8 when I went there, and it skyrocketed to like a 12. And that was in the midst of me writing When Love Wins. So I had to go back into When Love Wins and revisit and re-edit. And the process of editing is most of what it takes with a novel. And that's what I have to tell myself when I read these really good books. This was not their first raw, rough draft. Like they went through, it's about how dedicated you are to the editing process. Like that's what it's about. So those would be the nuggets, you know, kind of piggybacking off of what Erika said. Definitely know this is not an overnight thing, but if it's in you, you were called to do it. Don't give up. Work on your craft, do, you know, the workshops, the classes, get other eyes on your manuscript, get the feedback that you need for a high quality product, and know that everyone's going to have an opinion, but really you're the author. So your opinion is the only one that counts.
Wow. I enjoyed all that information that, that you all shared with us. So we had some questions coming in. So specifically alluding to the books that you wrote, what do you desire the readers to get out of their books? We can start with Nicole.
I know that there is always an underlying theme of healing in my writing. So the very first 2 books were about healing specifically from heartbreak. My Urban Stories compilation of different issues, from social injustice to divorce, to sisterhood and friendship, to breakups. And all of it is all about healing, hope, spiritual growth, knowing that these difficult things in life are not the end. And so, of course, with When Love Wins, it's the same message. Love does win in the end, you know. So I always want people to walk away having more insight into themselves, the things that they're dealing with, and having hope and encouragement that whatever pain and difficulties they're dealing with will come to an end of healing and hope.
Erika?
Yeah, with a book called Chocolates, I was thinking about cocoa being the same concept as melanin. And the more cocoa in a chocolate, the darker the chocolate, the more melanin, the darker the skin. And so basically, my book is just kind of, as an African-American woman, I was like, I have a voice that I want to speak about something so intensely deep, but I want to do it in a really simple way, in a sweet way. And so I want it to be that voice, because I feel like sometimes we get targeted into being a certain type of strong, heavy voice, and that's just not my personality. And so that's not where I was coming from. And so that's just kind of where that's kind of where that was coming from. Yeah.
Okay. Also, just want to ask, what would you say is unique about your writing style? I think you kind of alluded to it earlier in our conversation. So, Erika, do you want to address that first?
I'm not sure like what I think is unique in my writing style, besides the fact that it's me. It's an individual person, so my voice is my own. The subjects I speak about are universal. I think the same with Nicole, but I think for me, mine always comes from a space of poetry. I do a lot of beautiful writing, so maybe that's that.
Okay.
And you said that you're able to take really kind of tough situations and make them more simple, which is a gift for sure.
Yeah.
I would say for me, it is infusing my love for God with Black culture, and just showing that you can have fun and love God. You can be fly and love God. You can listen to hip hop and love God. Like, I really loved writing When Love Wins. It gave me such joy because I have these 2 characters who are so different. Natalie's like the conservative Christian, and then Ashley is like the fly one that's kind of kicking it. And I honestly just feel like both of those characters. So I just love being able to show that God is tangible and he's not high up sitting there looking down at you distant, but he is love with us on this journey in our culture, loving us in the way that we were created to be loved, and made us in the image of thick hair and darker skin and thick shapes and all of that kind of we have in common. So I just love being able to show that like God has swag, honestly.
Nice.
Wonderful.
I actually was able to throw in a little Jesus in my book too, and it's really slight, but I was like, I'm getting that in there somehow. So it says like a chocolate covered blessing. We're just as sweet outside as we are within. So I was
Okay.
like, my God.
Oh, wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. I know Nicole alluded to this earlier, talking about the fucking research. So like what
Sorry.
Okay, we touched a little nerve there of the research. So what went into the research that you had to do, and how long did you like spend researching before writing your book?
You want me to take it?
You want to go ahead?
Go for it.
Well, as I said, with urban stories, and one of our mutual friends, Jamia, is like she's like one that I piggyback a lot of stuff off of, and she's a writer and a creative, and she gets on me about how easy it is for me to write, right? Because it does flow out of me, whereas a lot of writers, and Erika touched on that, having time, and even if you have the time, just trying to get the words out. I have not struggled in that way. Okay, I admit. However, with When Love Wins, that was a whole nother thing. So urban stories just flow it out, and I just But with short stories, you don't have to go as deep with the character development. And Erika talked about that too. Like I've heard people come up with birthdays for their characters, astrology signs, their favorite color. Like they get really deep into like fleshing out these characters. So with the novel, that was my first experience with like, oh, this feels like labor, and it still was flowing. The story itself flowed, but because I was doing a different city, like I mentioned, New York and New Jersey, and I was kind of pulling off of things from a trip from 10 years ago. And I thought I can get away with just kind of interviewing people from those locations. And one of my beta readers and interviewees is like, you just got to go. Right. So I just had to bite the bullet, which I'm glad I did. But because I was dealing with a city I wasn't from, a younger audience, I got a focus group together of young 20-somethings. I had to get their feedback on some of the things too. So even though I was writing what I knew, because that's what they say, write what you know, I still had these nuances where I had to do more research. And so I had some beta readers, I had interviewees, I took a trip, I got a manuscript critique, then I had to do a line edit, copy edit. There's a lot of different types of edits. And then my own source of editing where I read through it different ways, printed out, read through it, had my listeners. So Jamia was one of them, and another creative friend who listened to all of the raw manuscript and got their feedback. So it has been a journey to get to this space, but that's because of what the product that I wanted it to be. So it just depends on what your goals are. But for me, I knew that I want this to really hit this generation and hit its target of transforming hearts and lives, speaking to the youth about Black culture and faith.
Erika?
Mine is way lighter because it's a book called chocolate. I did do research though, as far as like just learning about new chocolates. I ate a lot of chocolate while I was writing, but honestly, like just learning about like dark chocolate and milk chocolate and the components of them. It's true. It's just, and then you're like, when you're looking into something called chocolates, I ended up learning that there was child slavery, child labor, like cocoa plantations have a lot of slavery going on them. And like all of this stuff that I ended up learning about what chocolate companies are doing. Some are doing a lot more than the others. They all signed this agreement that they were going to stop doing child labor and like slavery on cocoa plantations. And a majority of the chocolate companies are not. They've never made good on their promise. And so learning about that kind of stuff was something I wasn't expecting to be doing research on. But then because of that, I was like, oh, I want to get more involved in certain things. And so that with such a light book, that part of the research was interesting. And I learned about, there's a chocolate called blonde chocolate, which nobody like knows what that chocolate usually is. And it's a white chocolate that's been caramelized like you would a roux. Or gumbo, and then it changes the property of chocolate, of white chocolate. So there's that chocolate. There's one called a dark milk chocolate, which is basically if a dark chocolate and milk chocolate had a baby. So it's got the richness of a dark chocolate, but the sweetness of a milk chocolate. And so it's just random, like how many types of different researches you end up doing. Nicole doing novels. on heavy topics is really different than me doing a book that's like, hey, we all come in a different shade of chocolate.
Right.
But because I also work with nonprofits and still continually wanting to do something with vitiligo, I want to do something with albinism. So there's so many other aspects to that that I am working on and looking into doing a blog. So I think they're highlighting a lot of these companies that are doing some amazing things within these subject lines. So
Wonderful. So wrapping up with the two remaining questions. So what advice would you give for students? I know someone reached out to me recently, or a third year student reached out. So for students that are looking to maybe write a novel and maybe start as during their time as students, how would they go about starting their journeys to becoming an author from your perspective? Maybe we start with Erika, then Nicole.
I just think, depending on whatever your major is, and honestly, sometimes I don't even think that matters. Like whatever you're interested in and majoring in, you do that. I love psychology. I like people's, the thought in the brain and how it worked and like feelings, and so that also kind of plays a part within writing. So I don't think you have to be a creative writer. Nicole said she didn't, that wasn't her major. I don't think that's something you have to like focus on being in. And then actually, when I was telling Seth, like when I went to Miami, there wasn't a strong journalism program. It was more of a creative writing, and I was interested in journalism at the time. And so luckily I was getting a lot more of English lit and, that type of like, which was a lot of beautiful and poetic writing as well. But I think that, yeah, you just kind of, you change as a student, from where like your first year to your second year to your third year. I mean, half the time you don't even know what you want to major in. So overall, you can also just major in things that you find interesting and still write. I mean, all the subjects in life all still evolve, and like, people write research papers, they do all of this type of writing, there's grant writing. So there's always a skill and a trade to writing in general. And then if you want to, like, if you have a specific passion for something, then you go towards that passion.
Nicole.
I definitely agree. I think the good news is you don't have to major in writing to be a writer. Mm-hmm. And I did like briefly declare myself a journalism major, but that's because I was so scared of my calc class because it like scarred me. I'm still scarred. But I ended up dropping that and going into marketing. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I didn't major in something like journalism, because it's funny, I write for a paper now, but I think it would have stunted my creativity. I think the path that I was supposed to go on was more about infusing life experience and being free in the creative space of being a writer. And I'm kind of like type A, admin, but I get to let all that go when I write. I don't even do an outline, which makes my editor cringe. I just like the free write. Now, maybe that's a lot more editing on the back end. I don't care, but I just want that space to be one with my creator and just to release. And so I think students need to know that there's no just one way. You don't have to be boxed in. Now, if you want, you can start doing research. You can look into writing coaches. You can take workshops, creative writing classes, English classes, all that stuff. But even if you don't, if you choose to do something else, like Erika said, you can still write on the side. You can grow it as a hobby to a business. It's flexible. But I would say, do your due diligence. Look into, do you want to just self-publish? Do you want a traditional publish? What works for you? Take your classes, take your writing workshops on the side or major, but you're not limited. And it can develop when you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s. I know a woman who's a best-selling author from Cleveland. She started in her 60s and she was a lawyer for most of her career. Mm-hmm. And you're going to keep transitioning and evolving in your identity. And I think the best writers are usually older because you can infuse the life experience that you gained. So. Okay,
wonderful. So what's next? What's next for the future? Where can folks find you? So let's start with Nicole and then end with Erika.
So for me, it is the book launch for When Love Wins. If you are not in the Cleveland area, you can hop on the virtual book launch. Tickets are free on Eventbrite, and that's March 31st at 8 p.m. And then if you are in the Cleveland area, you can come to my 40th birthday book bash, and that'll be April 1st. So that's the more immediate thing. You can learn more about the book at whenlovewins.love. There's also a cute little quiz I could send you a link to. I'll drop it in the chat that you can figure out if you're Natalie or an Ashley. You can also get a free chapter download. And the really cool thing about it is I'm doing an audiobook this time around. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we literally just stopped recording last weekend, and it was very draining because I had to act out all the characters.
Wow, okay.
So we have an audiobook. All of that stuff is at whenlovewins.love. You can learn more about me at NicoleMiller.com and learn more about my other books at NicoleMiller.com. We also have the publishing house, ND Miller Publishing. So we're going to release the website in the next couple of weeks. We do one-on-one coaching calls, 45 minutes, where you tell me where you're at, what your goals are, and steps to get you to where you want to go. And then we do hybrid publishing and then editing services.
All right. Wonderful. Erika.
Yeah, so I'm between Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, and San Diego, California. So I'm both West Coast and Midwest. I do a lot of book signing events, a lot of vendor events. So you can find me there. Who knows? You never know. I might be on TV one day. That'd be awesome as well. Put that out in the universe.
Okay.
And yeah, my website's just Erika with a K, erikabaty.com. You can find me there. I'll be revamping that page a little bit, just to create it to be more blog-like. So I'm involving a little bit more of what else I'm doing. And there you'll be able to find my publishing information, and it's just Erika Baty Publishing. I'm working on that right now. Do be patient on that. Having a 1-year-old is, a little challenging from the business side, but yeah, I'm around. I'm here. I'm also a Delta. I'm part of the Divine Nine. And I'm just open. I'm open and available. And if anybody wants to reach out to me and who is at Miami or alumni, I am more than happy, to be of service. Love and honor.
All right. Well, wow. We just had a great conversation. I enjoyed myself. You both enjoy yourselves today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was really hoping I'd have my sweatshirt so I could wear that today.
A little Miami swag. Okay.
A little bit of Miami swag.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've been back. So
Yeah, come here all the way from Iowa, California. We'll welcome you here. Matter of fact, I'll see you when you come here.
Like I told you, I've still never had a toasted roll, so I still.
Oh no!
My goodness.
How did you go with that one? Those things
I don't know. Otis Spunkmeyer cookies. That's the answer.
See, when my parents went here, they always made sure to get the toasted roll at Shriver before they left. That's pretty much all.
Told me they're going to take my Black Street cred for not ever having a toasted.
on that note, we had a great conversation for our first webinar on Black History Month, talking about some of our authors here. And I have at least 7 or 8 Black alumni books in my collection. So I'll put that out on social media for folks to see. We have a whole bunch of other folks that have wrote books, and so we'll maybe feature them as we go on. Tomorrow, we have another webinar, awesome webinar for Black History Month. It's our Lived Experiences webinar, where we share about the comprehensive project documenting Black life at Miami. So today will be the premiere of Bittersweet, the life of Black students at a predominantly white institution. And so all that will be on the website. All talk about the website. It has like 10,000 pages of documented information, biographies, interviews. And so we were all in on this project. So we want folks to come and watch that. It'll be tomorrow at noon. So we'll talk about that project, and we will announce later when folks can see the premiere on our Lived Experiences website. So we thank Nicole and Erika from class of 04 and 05, the 2000s.
Early 2000s.
The early
2000s crew today. So we're great to have them here, and tune into other webinars that come. We always have fantastic webinars that are on our streaming platform here. So love and honor to all of our Miami University community that tuned in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.